Welcome, I'm Paul, this is Dave, the cutie pie right here. Today I have 18 Glitch in the Matrix and paranormal stories for you. Let's get to it. Case file number 2799, written by It's All on Me, When a Hunch is Guaranteed. I will often get this knowing feeling about something, and the knowing feeling has never failed me. The most recent instance of this was when I knew exactly what my professor's husband looked like. I was in class, just watching her speak, and I got this vivid image in my mind of a man who I knew was her husband, and her 2 children. I purposely analyzed this mental image, which I just knew was right, so I could compare it to a picture later. Keep in mind, I had never seen a picture of this professor's husband. She had never described him. When I later searched her on Facebook, I looked through her albums and saw a picture of her husband. He was literally exactly how I imagined him. His face, skin tone, height, build, hair color, and even haircut were the same. I also knew, through what I imagined, that her boys were blonde. This kind of stuff happens to me all the time, but I'm only right when I get a knowing feeling. Sometimes I'll look at a person and get these weird images flickering through my mind. Once, a family friend told me in passing how she bought a new townhouse. Well, I got an intense image of that townhouse, what side of the street it was on, and how far down it was. I never confirmed this with her. A year later, my family visits her in her new townhouse, and I tell my dad, it's going to be on the left, halfway down. It was all exactly how I imagined. I was completely right. So, to what extent does instinct transcend our available information? Because you have this all the time with the subconscious. It picks up things we aren't consciously aware of. It's like, it has its own filtration system. What gets to us, the conscious experience we know as us, is really a tiny fragment of all the information being processed by the subconscious. But still, if your subconscious never got that information at all, like what your teacher's family looks like, well, it doesn't matter if it's filtered or not, it was never there to begin with. So, somehow, some people's brains can process information that they shouldn't even have access to. Who's giving it to them? How is that subconscious stealing that information from the universe? I don't know. But I wish I had that power. Case file number 2800, written by The Man Right There. Texas night, strange lights, 0 answers. I'm in Texas. At this point, I was passing through the Brownwood area, driving with some friends. Someone points out an abnormally bright light blinking on and off. Odd. It's a plane, satellite, weather balloon, whatever. No worries. I hear, whoa, it moved. Again, I ignore this. People overreact to dumb crap. My other friend has started watching by this point, and starts making commentary about, seriously, what the fluck is that? So here's what it would do. Blink, 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 disappear. Maybe 1 or 2 seconds later, reappear nowhere near its original spot. Blink, 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 disappear, rinse and repeat. It moved absurdly fast, or seemed to, looking up into the night sky. Once I actually saw it disappearing and reappearing, seemingly instantaneously, I thought it was weird too, so we pulled over. More people pulled over when we did, and we all muttered amongst ourselves, what is that? No one knew, of course. As we watched it, some other odd behavior occurred. It stopped moving and would blink, blink, blink. Another light appeared next to it. Blink, blink, blink. Another. It made a perfect row of rows across the sky. Then they all went out, and no more lights. Dyes Air Force Base is vaguely near here, over 70 miles. But that's all I can really figure this was. I can't explain what it was. I've never seen anything exactly like it again. If anyone knows what the fluck that would have been, cool. I've been wondering since I was a teen. Case file number 2801, written by Crusoe. No pain, no scar, just pure willpower. When I was 7, I was out playing, fell, and when I caught myself with my hands, my right hand landed on a small, sharp pebble, gouging a hole in my hand, which had a little flap of skin hanging off. It was sore and tender, but not super painful. It really was a small little divot carved into the pad of my palm. Again, at the time, I had a precocious occupation with the paranormal, reading books about ghosts, PSI, etc. So I simply thought, well, let's see if this works. I want my hand to be healed. And I made up my mind that it would be healed, and then decided to check on it later. I avoid looking at the palm of my hand for most of the day. After lunch, I decide to look at my hand, and I can no longer find the wound. There is no pain, no hole, no flap of skin, nor scar. It was just like it never happened. Case file number 2802. Written by Sucks at Social Stuff. Evidence of Alien Biology 101. I suck at social stuff too. This happened back in late 1997. I was doing my regular morning routine, which involves shaving, crapping, and taking a shower. Everything was going normally, like a regular workday. But once I finished my shower and started to dry off, I noticed something odd on my left forearm, about 2 inches up from my wrist. There was what looked like a hole. It was about 3 to 3.5 millimeters in diameter and about 2 millimeters deep and perfectly round. It looked as if the volume of a baby aspirin was subtracted from my skin. I was a little freaked out by this, so I checked the towel I was using as well as the shower tub to see if there was any blood, but there wasn't anything. I went back to my bedroom and checked the bed and sheets and found no sign of blood anywhere. I was fascinated by this hole and would often stare at it trying to figure out how it occurred. I touched the skin at the base of it, which was bright pink but completely dry, with a toothpick, and it felt very sensitive but not painful. There was no scab. It healed up over the course of the following 3 or 4 weeks by filling up with skin. The hole got shallower every day until it filled in perfectly and now feels smooth. The only telltale sign is that the skin where the hole was is a little lighter than the surrounding skin. Nothing like that had ever happened to me before or since, and I don't know anyone else who had something like that happen. The day I found it, I showed it to a colleague at work, and it seemed to freak him out more than me. So, we all get wounds sometimes that we don't know how it got to. Like, I have a scratch on my elbow down here, which you can't see because of my hoodie, but I don't know where I got it. It doesn't hurt until you look at it and realize that it's there. It's almost like the wound materializes from the ether, like the universe programs it in only when you see it. But it is a normal, I'm sure it's just something that I banged my elbow somewhere or scratched it from a stick. I don't know. I doubt it's aliens. But in this case, if the wound is so, it's almost like surgical precision, right? Now, I don't know if something was implanted or something was subtracted. Maybe you had an implant, you never noticed it. It was sealed over. Maybe they can heal it properly. And then they went to retrieve the data. They're studying us, like lab rats. I don't like the idea, but it does make some sense. Though then you ask the question, were they just in a hurry or something? Why didn't they reseal it properly? I guess at that point it doesn't matter if you find out, like what are you going to do? Even if you know for certain it's aliens, you can tell people, but who's really going to believe you? And even if they did, what can we do about it? I mean, is there any defense against that? I don't think so. If they're that advanced, maybe it's best we don't know for sure. Case file number 2803, written by Simply Billy. The Candle and the Speech. I walked into my room towards my computer, which was playing music. Then, out of nowhere, it's like I blacked out, moved back like an inch, and the music went back a few milliseconds. Like I went back in time a few milliseconds. Second event is at my uncle's funeral. While my mom was giving her speech about my uncle, I noticed the candles up on the side of the stage. There were 3 candles all lit at the same time, but only 2 of them had actually melted at all. 1 candle didn't melt at all until my mom finished speaking, and then it started melting like the rest. My uncle is my mom's brother, if no one could figure that out. Few other random ones like footsteps at night on the wooden floors in my house when no one is awake, etc. Case file number 2804, written by Zombie Cat 2001. I blinked. It got closer. When I was young, I would see faceless, formless people peeking around corners and looking at me until I turned my head to look at them. I only ever saw them as a blurry outline in the periphery of my eyes, but their movement and shape were unmistakably humanoid. This would happen often, however, I noticed a lot more when I was alone. One day I decided to play a game with one of them, who would duck away every time I looked. So I would turn away and try to catch it unaware as it began to peek back out again. Every time I looked away longer, it would get bolder, peeking out further and further until I could see a shoulder, a torso, a leg shuffle out. And eventually, it would step out entirely and watch me through the doorway. At this point, I smiled and knew there was no way it could hide in time, so I whipped my head across to look at it and saw something that resembled an emaciated flesh morph suit. I would rather put this down to active imagination because some things shouldn't be explained. Case file number 2805, written by Baldazer. The town was empty, except for him. One time, I was following my brother from our grandmother's house to his house. Simple road trip, right? He has GPS, I'll follow. It'll be cool. Little did we know, Tom decided we wanted to go through the creepiest small little towns. It gets about nighttime, and we start coming into this town, and we hadn't seen a car in about 30 minutes. I was getting sketched out. So we come into this town, and we don't really see anybody. We don't even see many lights on and stuff, except from the middle of town. Near the right smack middle of that town was a house with 2 police cars and an ambulance outside it. The vehicle's lights were on, no sirens though. I get more and more sketched the fuck out. Hadn't seen a single person, mind you. No one inside, no one outside, not even a driving car. Until the last streetlight in the town, and a man is crouched down in the streetlight, shirtless, crouched, eating something from his hand. I hoped it was a sandwich. We get out of that town and my brother calls me and instantly asks me if I was sketched the fuck out as he was. And I was. He was. We all were. It was terrifying and zombie-esque. I was not ready for it. I cannot fathom what happened in that town to be that creepy. It scares the balls out of me every time I think about it. Oh, and then my brother said Tom wanted us to turn around. We missed the turn. Yeah, GPS will sometimes route you through to places that really aren't populated well. I mean, there are plenty of towns in the US that don't have a lot of people in them. But still, if it's large enough, and it doesn't seem completely abandoned, like all the buildings are decayed or something, I don't know. Could the man you saw just be hopped up on, substances? Maybe. But it's still creepy, and I wouldn't want to go back. Case file number 2806, written by Dinkelberg. The Doorbell at 4 a.m. I must have been 14 or 15, and I had a friend staying over. We were both asleep in my room, which was at the front of the house, so if I looked up out of my window, I could see the drive and the front door. I woke up and could hear the sound of someone on the stones surrounding our drive, walking around. I could tell it was not the time to wake up because it still wasn't too bright. I checked the clock and it was around 4:15 a.m. There weren't many stones outside that house. It was quite a small drive, and to give you a scale, I guess you could park an average car on those stones, if it was paved, no more. I could hear footsteps on the phone for a good 10 minutes. At first I ignored it. Still half asleep, but I soon was listening intently. Eventually, I crept out of bed, friend still asleep, and moved over to the window, ready to peer out the window to see what was out there. At that moment, the doorbell went, which at the time roared through the sleeping house. I knew this was my opportunity, so I stuck my head through the curtains and had a clear view of my whole drive, including the stones only way out of the drive to join the road. Despite not being the biggest drive, it would have taken a couple of seconds to press the doorbell, turn, and run and hide somewhere off the drive. Certainly not as long as it would have taken me for me to move my head a few inches forward. Still, no one was there. I could still hear the doorbell in my head. It was crazy loud in contrast to the silence before. No one else got up to check the door. My friend didn't even stir. Case file number 2807, written by Kat Armstrong. Lost in the forest, right next to home. Delivering flyers with my parents, maybe 7 years old. One weekend went to someone else's neighborhood for a little extra cash and ended up in a beautiful street I'd never seen before. One whole side of the road was thick forest with the biggest trees I'd ever seen. The other side was upper middle class houses gently sloping up a hill to a dead end, but was a forest that caught my eye. Threw the flyers onto the ground and explored the woods for about 5 minutes, following a trail, until the folks called and we moved to the next street and the next after. I asked my folks where that street was with the forest so I could bike to it, as it was pretty close to my house. They had no idea what I was talking about. Lived in that area for the next 10 plus years and knew every corner of it, but never found that street again. Yeah, that forest leads to something magical, I have no doubt about that. Why did it appear to you, and is it a forest just trapped in a different pocket dimension or a different universe that you can't access? Why would it be materialized just for you though? I don't know. But it does remind me that I've had experiences similar to that, where, as a kid I would go out on my bike all day long. Pretty much, it wasn't a rule, but I would go out during the day and just have to be back home before the streetlights came on, really, and even then, sometimes after that. So I would explore all around, and sometimes I found places that I never could find again. Now, I don't know, it might just be my kid memory, I just forgot where it was, but sometimes, especially if it's close by where you live, you start to question things. Case file number 2808, written by M. Palacios, 11. Broke my leg, but not my luck. In November 2007, my senior year of high school, I was leaving my friend's house, driving home, about a 5-mile commute. It was about 1 a.m. I was driving home, sober, because my mom wanted me home, and since she never gave me a curfew, I figured I would respect her request. As I am about a mile away, a truck with its high beams gets right on my butt. I'm doing 45, the speed limit. There's not much of a shoulder, but as I attempt to move over, he slams on the gas and passes me. Total badass. All of a sudden, he stomps on the brakes. I had little time to react. I could either slam into a guardrail on the right side, or swerve across the oncoming lane and into the opposing shoulder. I chose the last option. Thankfully, there were no cars. I made it successfully over to the shoulder, still doing about 30 miles per hour, when I noticed a dried-out creek ahead. I maybe slowed to about 20, but I wound up colliding into the concrete wall that was at about a 75-degree angle in my little 1997 Saturn. Upon colliding, the airbags deployed, and I heard what sounded like a gunshot. I later learned that was the sound of my left femur breaking. On top of that, I looked down and saw my right foot facing left, ankle broken in 5 places. My left wrist broken, and my nose also broken. Upon a solid 15 minutes of yelling for help, I tried a few other, lame, tactics to get out of the car. Bad idea with broken limbs. My door was jammed and would not open. I reached everywhere my body would let me try to, in an attempt to find my phone. It was sitting on the cup holder before I crashed, so it could have gone anywhere. I reached around the back seat with my one good limb and found my camera, and tried to take pictures of the street to get someone's attention with the flash. Car horn didn't work. Then, I grabbed a fold-up chair that was also on the back seat and tried ramming the window. Why? I also tossed a few coins out to try and listen for water to see if I was at risk of sinking. November in Texas equals no chance of water. Between all this, I keep thinking my phone will turn up. No luck. Anyway, I did a repetition of these things as well as shouting, asking for help from God, and crying the manliest tears. At around the 3 a.m. mark, I tried flashing my lights, when I realized that my lights never turned on. It occurred to me that my battery probably got flucked. I break off the rearview mirror to make one last attempt to search for my phone, and decide that it's time to just sleep this out and solve this in the morning. Later learning that with all the blood I had lost, sleeping would have been the worst thing to do at that time. I lean my chair back and laugh at the fact that while nothing has gone my way in the last 3 hours, my seat can still lean back. I make one final attempt to open the door, put my jacket over my eyes, and begin to fall asleep. Here's where it gets relevant. I had a dream. In my head, this dream lasted a good 10 minutes. I watched myself experience the entire accident, all the way up until I had fallen asleep. I saw a light bulb go off in my head, where I then picked my butt up, reached underneath, and pulled my phone out of my butt. Kidding. In the dream, I actually picked my butt up and pulled my phone out from underneath me. I immediately woke up and noticed only 1 minute had gone by. I proceeded to lift my butt, reach underneath, and recover my cell phone. I laughed at my inability to not check what was literally the closest spot to me and stared at my phone in shock. I opened it up, flip phone like a boss, dialed 911, and put the phone to my ear. Then I heard a familiar beep, looked back at my phone and saw low battery, powering down. Before giving up hope, I remembered I had my phone charger in my console. I fished it out, and without thinking, plugged it into the outlet underneath my stereo. I plugged my phone in, powered it on, called 911, called my dad to let him know. A few funny episodes happened in there, but I'll spare them for the sake of getting the story over with. And was airlifted to the hospital where I recovered through the Thanksgiving break. Was homeschooled by one of my favorite teachers, wheelchaired around for a few months, crushed around school for the first week of February 2008, and was back on my feet shortly thereafter. All thanks to a quick dream. What a great story of survival in desperate times after a crash like that. I mean, I've never been in a crash. Well, I was in a crash. It was at a stoplight and someone rear-ended us. I was with my mom at the time. It was a very, very low-end crash. Even then, though, it still hurt my neck. It's amazing. And if you're going fast enough, damn. But you saved yourself with the dream, and really I think this probably isn't a glitch. I mean, maybe a guardian angel was involved in feeding you the information in your dream, but it could just be your subconscious that gave you the information in dream form. Now, you do wonder, why is the subconscious so finicky and, giving you the information? Just give it to me. I don't have to go and dream, right? Just tell me where it is. Oh, it's right underneath me. Okay, thank you. Thank you, brain. But no, you had to dream to get it, and you did. You saved yourself. Probably. Really good. Well done. Case file number 2809, written by Anonymous. Golden Retriever's Warning. I was 12 years old, had just gotten off the bus from school, and really had to pee. I ran into my house and went straight to the bathroom. I was the only one home, which wasn't totally uncommon for this time of day. However, my dad's landscaping business operated from a building in our backyard, and so sometimes he would be home, but today he was on a job site. So anyways, here I am peeing and my golden retriever starts to bark in the kitchen. She typically did this when someone pulled into the drive, so I hurried out of the bathroom to see what the deal was. However, when I walked to the kitchen, she wasn't barking out towards the yard. She was barking into the next room over, the dining room. So I slowly leaned around the corner and just got a glimpse of the back of someone's leg before they walked away and I couldn't see anymore. I flipped, grabbed the cordless phone and my dog, and hightailed it out of the house into the backyard. I called my dad, who was luckily only a few minutes from home. He called the police and they searched the house and neighborhood. I had an open view of all the exits of the house and saw no one leave, but they never found anyone. Case file number 2810, written by Bill Nidus. Smarties versus Physics. My friend and I found ourselves in the back of his older sister's car, caught in that familiar limbo of youthful anticipation. We were trying to decide if Chuck E. Cheese's would still be open late enough for us to grab a meal elsewhere first. It was a kind of typical high school fun that involved nothing more complicated than sharing a bag of Smarties we'd brought from his house. The air was filled with casual chatter and the sweet, powdery scent of candy. We were jokingly tossing Smarties at each other, a harmless game to pass the time. I remember dodging one in particular, a reflex more than anything. The car windows were undeniably closed, yet, to our utter astonishment, the Smartie sailed right through the glass as if it weren't there at all. I stared in utter disbelief, my eyes glued to the trajectory of the small candy. Then I looked at my friend, whose wide eyes mirrored my own amazement. We both distinctly witnessed the Smartie pass through the window as if it were nothing but air, landing with a soft thud in the parking lot outside. Even now, years later, I have absolutely no logical explanation for what we saw. It's a memory that remains vivid and perplexing, difficult for me to fully accept because it simply makes so little sense in the confines of our known reality. There are singular small events like this, instances where things happen that just cannot be explained by any rational means that we know because it just defies the laws of physics. A Smartie, even though it's small, cannot pass through a window. There's magic tricks. Someone walks through a window or sticks their arm through it or something like that. Now that's a trick. This isn't a trick. No one's pulling a magician's prank on you or anything in the car, right? So no. The Smartie phase through solid matter. Now maybe there's some amazing way to do this with technology, but you don't have any advanced alien technology or anything like that to phase through solid matter. So it's just an instance of the laws of physics not working for some reason in that rare event. It makes you wonder, scientists studying the laws of physics, how often do they see this? Do they ever see this, where the laws of physics simply aren't working, even when being observed directly? I mean, we have weird things that go on, but they're replicable, like the double slit experiment, where light is both a wave and a particle, but when you observe it, the waveform collapses and it becomes a particle with a discrete energy. It's not observing, it's not the observer, it's not like consciousness that does it, it's just anything interacting with it collapses the waveform. And this is true for anything, not just light. But it's just easier to test with light. But you can observe that, replicate it, it always works. The laws of physics we have should always work because when we test them, it always works. So why in these rare instances where it can't be replicated, do they fail? It's almost like someone was intentionally manipulating him just for you, for that instance. But why? Is it a prank by the simulation masters? Maybe. Because it just seems like if it was an error, we would detect them here and there, like scientists studying the nature of reality would see it, right? Case file number 2811, written by Bioya, Secrets of Doctor and Nurse. When I was a little kid, we moved to an older house in the country, and there was a little old detached single-car garage with no power to it. Apparently it wasn't structurally sound, and my parents told me to stay out of it because my father was going to tear it down as soon as he could. One afternoon, I was playing outside, and I went into the garage to see if anything was in there. There was really nothing to see at all, but as I stood there, I heard voices. I strained to hear, but could only faintly hear them. I remember hearing a man say something like, "Is he ready, nurse?" and a woman saying, "Yes, doctor." I wasn't scared, but I couldn't figure out where the voices were coming from. I stepped outside the building, and it was either in fall or early spring because I recall I had on a little brown jacket. The wind was blowing lightly, and I wondered if I was hearing a television or radio, but I couldn't hear the voices outside the building. I went back inside and listened closely, and again I could faintly hear the two of them talking. I was more puzzled than scared, and I went into the house and told my mother I heard someone talking in the old garage. She dismissed it and told me to stay out of there. My father tore the building down a couple weeks later, and that was the end of it, except I have always wondered what it was. Case file number 2812, written by Broken Phoenix. My cats are evil, but maybe my kitchen is too. I am convinced that my apartment's kitchen is haunted. I see things staring at me when I first walk in there. The cabinets above the counter will not be fully closed sometimes. In order to cope with this scary crap, I have convinced myself that it's just my cats being evil and stupid. Whatever. So, not even a week ago, I was in the kitchen cooking dinner for myself and my significant other. I heard him unlock the door, open the door, relock it with both locks, step on the squeaky spot in front of the door, sit in his chair, rocks the damn squeaky thing, and doesn't say a word, which is unusual. I'm just talking away from him. Finally, I turn around to see what the hell he's doing, sitting in his chair and not changing his clothes before dinner, and he's not there. Whatever. Figured he was in the bedroom changing, and I didn't hear him. As I turn back around, he walks in the front door, takes off his shoes, and starts talking to me about his crappy day. I ran to the bedroom, and no one was there. I will remain convinced it was my cat, because I will be living here for another year regardless. But oh god, I'm scared of my kitchen if I can't see my cats. Case file number 2813, written by Pandorama. We were like cats that night. I was leaving a festival and heading to a cabin with a group of people when we decided to stop in the middle of butt-fuck nowhere, British Columbia, and sleep because it was late and everyone was tired. A friend and I decided to sleep on the roof of the truck because it was nice outside and we don't see the stars much in the city. We were talking about how in our old hometown, we used to see weird things flying in the sky, but passed it off because we live near an airbase. About 10 minutes later, we both noticed a tiny red dot in the sky, looking about the same size as if a plane was going by in the far distance. We would have thought it was just that, except it started to fly sort of downwards in a very, very awkward, sporadic, glitchy zigzag-like movement. We also noticed it was very faintly changing colors, but in a very soft way, like the colors were fading into each other. We watched it until daybreak because we kept scaring ourselves and couldn't sleep. I love road trips. Case file number 2814, written by Glassa. The floor shook, then a smile. I was sleeping at my sister's house to take care of plants and animals for a week. I could tell you a lot of crazy stories. We even thought the house was haunted. This is what made me believe her when she said her house was haunted. I woke up in the middle of the night. You know those times where you wake up and are perfectly awake and not sleepy at all? It was one of those. Suddenly, I started hearing the sound of someone stomping with very heavy boots, and it was on its way to the room I was sleeping in. I could feel the bed and floor shaking as it was stomping towards my room. I knew my sister always had a crowbar under her bed, so I grabbed that and wait, scared the fluck, as the thing is coming. The stomping stopped in front of the door. The doorknob turned. Her cat pushed the door open. What I saw at this moment made me believe in ghosts and everything related to that. There was something floating. It kind of looked like a face. It was pure white. I could see through it. It stared at me as I was standing there paralyzed. It was slowly floating towards me. I could not move or breathe because I was frightened. It got roughly close enough that if I could move, I would have been able to touch it. It smiled at me and vanished. I did not sleep for the rest of the night. I sat in the living room with every single light in the house turned on. I returned to my apartment in the morning and never slept there again. I just went during the day to feed the animals. Case file number 2815, written by Fishing Incorporated. This wasn't a normal Sunday at church. I'm an atheist at this point in my life, but I grew up in a Catholic family. We went to church every Sunday, and I went to Catholic church class as well. So one Sunday, my dad was going to drive me to class, and at the time I couldn't remember if that day or the next weekend that we didn't have class, but I was pretty sure it was the next class that we had off. So he drove me to the church, dropped me off, and left. I went in on a side door which leads to a hallway and a staircase, which led to the floor our classroom was on. So I started up the stairs, and as I was going, I could hear a dull murmur of a bunch of people talking. Like I couldn't hear what anyone was specifically saying, but I could hear people chatting and responding to each other. And I remember feeling relieved because I realized that I did in fact have class, and I must have been right and we had off class next weekend. So now I'm rounding the corner and making it up the last few steps, and exactly where my foot hits the top stair, that talking stops, like dead in its tracks. Just silence, and I froze in place. It was so quiet that my ears were now ringing, and I felt this stifling stillness and realized that I was completely alone in the building. My heart is pounding, and I can feel my pulse in my neck. I turned around and ran down the steps and the hell out of the building as fast as I could. I sat in the parking lot and called my dad to come get me. Case file number 2816, written by Anonymous. Strange Reflections and Vanishing Toys. Age 8. Living in a house we moved into that we weren't familiar with. It's late at night. Me and my brother are watching late night TV, and my parents are asleep. I walk into the kitchen from the living room to see if there's a snack, and I see my reflection in the kitchen window, but it looks very weird. I freeze and just stare. I call my brother and ask him to come look, without me looking away. He comes and looks at the window with me, and I just raise my arm and wave at my reflection. It waves back. I put my hand down, my reflection still waves at me. Then it stopped and put its hand down. My brother tried it, but it doesn't work for him. We turned on all the lights in the house and locked every door. Next morning, Mom asked us if we went outside because the dog's chain was pulled through the kennel fence and hooked on his collar. We have no idea. Later in the same house, after coming back from a family trip, we had toys from the airport. They are little plastic planes that you hang from the ceiling by a string, turn on the motor, and they fly in circles at fast speeds. Mom tells me to not leave it going and leave my room on the second floor. I do anyways. She tells me to go upstairs and turn it off. I go back upstairs and see the plane is gone. I can't find it anywhere at all. A month later, find it in a tree 3 miles away, 80 feet up in the air, tied to a branch. Years later, after moving from that house, a teacher of mine moved in and told me a weird story that happened to him at the house over the weekend. His kids were coming down for Thanksgiving and were supposed to show up Wednesday night after driving 4 hours from the airport. They are woken up at like 11 p.m. by hearing laughter and giggling and jumping on their backyard trampoline. Teacher thinks it's from his kids, sees them the next morning at breakfast, mentions, "Heard you guys jumping on the trampoline last night. You had a lot of fun?" His kids look at him and tell him that they didn't get in until 3 a.m. because their plane got delayed, and they snuck in and went straight to bed. All I can say is, I truly believe that house is a nexus, portal, wormhole, whatever for weird crap to happen. Now time for the jokes of the day. What do you call a bee that can't make up its mind? A maybe. What do you call a man lying by your front door? Matt. I always make sure to say mucho around my Spanish-speaking friends. It means a lot to them. Apparently I snore so loudly, it terrifies everyone in the car I'm driving. I was wondering why music was coming from my printer. Apparently the paper was jamming. Oh yeah. Video up here that YouTube thinks you'll like. Click it, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe. See you next time.